So you're very welcome for those of you who are just coming for the first time, and you're also very welcome those of you who have been here all day. So some boring housekeeping, which you've probably all heard, I know, 4 times. Well, this would be the 4th time, but you're being recorded, and if the speakers will be presenting in the order listed on the program. So we're starting with Anna, then Shona, then Shang-Yi. If you'd like to tweet about the day, please do, or share it on any other social media. Please use the hashtag ECRDay2022, and make sure, please, if you're sharing an image of someone or one of their slides, that you tag or cite them. And that's it from me. And now I'm going to introduce Jordan. This is Jordan McCulloch. He's a PhD candidate here in French Studies at Queen's University Belfast, and his doctoral project, which is funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council Northern Bridge Consortium, is centred on contemporary parental grief narratives. His wider research interests are in the area of French studies, the medical humanities, and death studies, and he is the author of a number of articles in this field. He is the postgraduate representative for the Association of French and Francophone Studies in Ireland, and chairs the Student Research Network in the School of Arts, English and Languages at Queen's. So I will now hand over to Jordan. Thanks, Jordan.
Great. Thank you so much, Alison. And again, I've said this every panel so far, but thank you again for everything that you've done in bringing this together. It's really been a wonderful day so far, and I know this panel will be no exception to that. So in our 4th panel of the day, we're thinking about European schemes. And we have 3 panelists to speak to us today. I'll introduce each panelist in turn before they speak. So just to remind the panelists as well, if you wouldn't mind turning your camera and your microphone off when you're not speaking, that'll allow us just to focus on the person who's speaking at any one time. So the first speaker on this panel is Dr. Anna Pils. So Anna is a Mary Skłodowska Curie Fellow in the School of Literatures, Languages and Cultures at the University of Edinburgh, with a 3-month secondment at the Muir Institute in National University of Ireland, Galway. She is a cultural historian who works at the intersection of cultural productions and environmental history. Her MSc project investigates a rich archive of Romantic-era travel writing on Ireland and Scotland's Atlantic coasts. And Anna previously held research fellowships at the Institute for Advanced Studies in the Humanities at the University of Edinburgh, a Carson Fellowship at the Rachel Carson Centre for Environment and Society at LMU Munich, and an Irish Research Council postdoctoral fellowship at University College Cork. And today, Anna will be sharing with us on German schemes. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jordan, for the generous introduction, and to Alison, of course, for bringing us all together for such a wonderful day of conversations about life after the PhD. As Jordan has said, I will be kind of speaking a little bit about German funding schemes, and you might wonder, why would I be doing that, or with what kind of authority do I speak? And indeed, I might speak with sort of limited authority on this, I have to admit. Although I am German, I spend most of my academic life outside of Germany. As you can see here from my kind of CV, my PhD is from 2013, so I no longer count as early career by any stretch of the imagination, and had an institutional fees only award and did my PhD part-time. And I'm kind of showing you the CV here to kind of demonstrate just again the different kind of career trajectories people take, and to also kind of give encouragement that sometimes what might not look as a very fundable starter turns out to be nonetheless a successful funding trajectory. So I was told it multiple times when I didn't manage to get funding for my PhD that I would have no shot at an academic career or getting any funding if my PhD wasn't even funded. As that line shows you, I then tried to prove people wrong. And had quite a lot of mobility throughout my kind of research career. Within the gaps that you see there, I held various kind of part-time teaching posts and hourly paid teaching posts. And it's kind of like a narrative of incremental increase, shall we say, in receiving funding. But to demonstrate here, there is also the invisible CV of unsuccessful applications behind all of those. And you can see here that with the Carson Fellowship that brought me to Germany, I had a first unsuccessful attempt, as well as with the Mary Curie, I had a first unsuccessful attempt. And I also put a line in about my attempt to apply for the National University of Ireland Awards, and I was ineligible because yeah, I didn't read the fine print. The fine print meaning one had to have a degree from an NUI institution, and a higher diploma didn't count as a degree. So I can laugh about it now, but believe me, I didn't laugh about it then. So make sure you read the fine print, and you can see there that on top of these rejections come 87 job application rejections. So again, it's in the aim of transparency and really being inspired by also last week's ECR day to show the visible as well as the invisible CV, and to say basically that a lot of feedback has gone into all of these applications. So then my topic today is to talk about the German funding landscape. And I came to Germany initially on a 6-month fellowship to the Rachel Carson Center for Environment and Society, about which I will talk about in a moment, in 2018, in December 2018. And that was then the first time that I kind of had a proper look at the German funding landscape with an eye for potentially staying in Germany. And what I can say about it is that it's very diverse. There are numerous funding bodies and very, very many schemes. It's a very flexible funding landscape, both in terms of project design as well as in starting dates. I know from colleagues in Germany who have kind of lined up project funding already 3 or 5 years ahead, that there's great flexibility in when you start, and you can kind of align certain project grants strategically. And another great benefit is that there's very strong support for the humanities among the German funding landscape. There are also a couple of challenges. It's a very complex system to navigate. There are obviously kind of some questions around German language, English language. Some institutions will have better English language support on their web pages, others maybe lesser so, but the main research funding bodies will have the German as well as English option on their web pages, and I will show you a couple of screenshots as examples. The research office support, again, can vary quite dramatically across institutions, but generally in German it would be referred to as Referat für Forschungsförderung oder Drittmittelanträge. And then there is the consideration for the specific research environment in Germany. It has a reputation for being quite hierarchical, and it also has a reputation, particularly in some disciplines, to be perhaps a bit traditional. So my own work looks, for instance, or engages a lot with concepts from cultural geography, and the German equivalent, Kulturgeography, is not a discipline that's very widespread in Germany. So if I ever were to pitch a project that has a strong cultural geography angle for a German funding body, I need to be conscious of that, and maybe see who will I cite and what work from the German academic landscape will I engage with in order to maybe target it at the right kind of reviewers for that proposal. And in Germany also the role of impact is very different to, say, the UK market or higher education environment. The emphasis on impact isn't so much there. So that can be an advantage for some. It can also be seen as a disadvantage for others, in the sense that reviewing panels might not be as used to seeing a strong impact emphasis. However, the landscape very much is changing, and we see that impact is kind of becoming more and more important as well, and especially in some kind of fields and disciplinary areas. So, but that's just to kind of be aware of what that kind of higher education environment is, and how your project or your work might fit into that, and what it has to offer to you. So where then could you find out about opportunities? sometimes international jobs are advertised at jobs.ac.uk, which we've heard about this morning. And I think all three of these have been mentioned this morning throughout sessions as well. So we have the research professional, which is the database that operates via subscription, and wherever you're based at the moment might have that subscription. Then there's the Early Career Researcher Central, which is free, and Euraccess, which is run through the European Commission. And to show you a little bit the interfaces here, so on the webpage for the research professional, this is me under my login through the institution. You can see that you have here kind of information as well about the higher education and research environment in Europe, or indeed elsewhere in the world. And you can kind of zoom in to specific countries, whether that is Germany, France, the Netherlands, Ireland, or Italy, for instance. And you can read a little bit about what the kind of current topics of discussions are, to get a little bit of a sense of the culture. The Early Career Researcher Central is great in order to allow you very targeted searches. So here you can choose by applicant country where you're finding yourself. I've kind of clicked for worldwide at the moment, but obviously you could kind of go further into options and choose the UK. The host country, so in this instance, Germany, and then you will get the listing of what opportunities are currently available. And then you click your way through. And you will see that, well, in this instance, there is 17 current funding schemes open for fellowships for early career researchers. And it works very similarly for Euraccess, which you see here in the sections for jobs and funding. You click on the country option, and then you can again choose the country within Europe and see how many programs are currently running, and then you can further refine the search as you go along. So the different kind of ways to go about it is, I suppose, similar to the UK. One can look for particular research centers, or Forschungszentren, as they're called in German, and see whether your project might align with any of those specific research centers. And this is what happened in my case. So my research took quite a dramatic turn. I started out working on women's literary history and theatre history in the Irish context of the late 19th, early 20th century. And through that somehow came, as Noreen was describing, had a little seed for a new project that then became my first postdoc project that brought me into the wider remit of the environmental humanities. And I became aware of the very kind of world-known research centre, the Rachel Carson Centre for Environment and Society. There's a typo in there, I apologise. At the LMU University in Munich. And this was a writing fellowship for which one had to submit a cover letter, a project description, and a schedule. And one could apply for a 3 or 6 month or 1 year. And I had applied for 1 year, but in the end was offered 6 months. That was one of the best experiences I've had, academically speaking. It was a very kind of enriching environment, and I certainly learned a lot. And I would also like to point out that what I learned whilst I was at the RCC, as it's referred to in shorthand, is that there were also a lot of visiting PhD students who were either part of ITN networks that are, so Marie Curie funded postgraduate students, or indeed other PhD students who had funding and had their host institutions, say in Sweden or in the UK or in Italy or in Spain, and their funding allowed them to kind of come to the RCC for 2 or 3 months, say, in order to benefit from the interdisciplinary research environment. And that way they were able to kind of find new mentors, be exposed to an international kind of research community, and yeah, kind of, I suppose, build their network, and also then learn about funding opportunities that might become available in Germany. The Carson Center, and this is obviously now mostly relevant for people who are working on topics or within the field of environmental humanities, but I wanted to make the point nonetheless, also runs a researcher in residence scheme, which means that you're getting paid a stipend. And in return for the stipend, you commit yourself to writing a grant application for which the host will be the RCC and the Ludwig Maximilians Universität, to one of the German funding bodies. So I think this is quite a good scheme, and it might be worth investigating. I'm not aware of other kind of research centres that run such schemes where you're essentially getting paid to develop a grant, and it's kind of an investment into your potential. And it's obviously great to be able to have the space and the support to develop a grant. And I'm making a point about it because the new fellowship round will be opened soon in June 2022 with a deadline in July. So you can check out the RCC and its opportunities if this is within your research area. Other opportunities that are kind of very institution-based have to do with what's in Germany called a Wissenschaftskolleg, or institutes for advanced studies. These can sometimes run fellowships under particular umbrella themes. I have applied unsuccessfully once to one of these, the Wissenschaftskolleg zu Berlin. I can't remember what the theme was at the time. It had something to do with environment and sustainability. And then they're kind of looking for researchers who are working on similar themes, or who are working on particular themes but come from different disciplines, to kind of create collaboration and create kind of synergies among cohorts of fellows. And sometimes these can be residential as well, and mostly be short-term, I'd say, for a maximum of say one year. And I've listed 2 examples here, and you can investigate that. So I'm just kind of drawing attention really to the various options that are there and how they map on or are kind of comparable perhaps to the UK landscape that might be more familiar to people. The key website that is most useful is from the Federal Ministry of Education and Research on research in Germany. And you can see here for the postdoc option, it gives you a long list of programs that are being run through the various funding bodies. And the further information I will show you to sketch out. I've kind of picked out a couple of examples of schemes that I feel might be of interest to you. So the types of funding then are very varied, from kind of short-term stints of 3 to 6 months to 1 or 2 year fellowships, or kind of larger, more long-term projects for 4, 5 or 6 years that would say allow you to be a research leader of a small research team. And here are some of the funding bodies, and they're by all means not all of them. So we have the Deutsche Akademische Austauschdienst, the DAAD, die Fritz-Thyssen-Stiftung für Wissenschaftsförderung, Volkswagen-Stiftung, Max Planck und die Alexander von Humboldt Institution. One of the main ones is the DFG, the Deutsche Forschungsgemeinschaft, which would be the equivalent to the AHRC. And each of these run their separate different schemes. They can be about conference organization or kind of network building, as well as individual grants, of course. So one scheme that I felt might be quite interesting to people is the Walter Benjamin program, which you can see here. It's for early career scholars in the kind of first 2 years after their PhD. It's a 2-year program, and it's very much kind of, to me, it looks a little bit like a Marie Curie scheme that has an emphasis on training and that allows either international researchers to come to Germany and to have a research project at a German institution, or for researchers in Germany to gain experience abroad. So this is one. What I find quite distinctive, I suppose, about the German schemes that I've kind of wanting to highlight is that they have rolling deadlines, which means you can submit at any time during the year, which going by questions earlier during earlier sessions, how to align your viva and your graduation with your kind of research application submissions that, you know, you can kind of fall through the cracks at times. So it might be worth kind of really keeping in mind German funding schemes that allow you to submit at any point during the year. They usually have a turnaround from 6 months to 9 months, with a then very kind of rapid start date if that is what you want. To investigate whether you would need to have had the viva. So you can contact people, for instance, at the DFG, and kind of investigate and look for the eligibility. I wasn't going to kind of go into detail with any one of these schemes in particular. I think my aim is really to highlight what opportunities are out there. Another scheme, and for some reason now the PowerPoint doesn't want to work. Oh yeah, now it does. Is the Minute program. A colleague of mine at the RCC was successful in achieving one of these. These are almost like an ERC starting grant, in that early career researchers with, as you can read there, who are at least 2 years and up to a maximum of 4 years, have that amount of postdoctoral experience and some international research experience, and wish to kind of lead a small research group. And then the funding would give funding for yourself as the principal investigator, as well as funding for the PhD students, if that is the kind of project design that you want to do, as well as kind of hosting particular events or setting up exhibitions, etc. And I think this is the program where you also are allowed a family allowance, if that suits your is relevant to your circumstances. And it's usually of a duration of 6 years and has a rolling deadline as well. So that's quite good. Another one of these kind of very ambitious fellowship schemes for early career researchers is the Freigeist Fellowship. And again, another colleague at the RCC was able to secure one of these. And there again, the emphasis is on kind of high risk research. So it's the language again of, I suppose, European research starting grants, where you're really pushing both the research project as well as yourself in terms of your skills and your development, and where you can kind of gain research independence and have academic freedom, as it's phrased there, for a clear time frame. Here again is a rolling deadline, and the duration is kind of quite flexible in that you have either 5 or 6 years as a sort of start, and then you can kind of apply for top-ups. And I suppose to show you what that means, the rolling deadline, and here is the kind of average decision times for proposals from the DFG in relation to the temporary position as principal investigator scheme, about which I can talk more about if that's what people would like. You can see here that it takes approximately seven months until you have a result in and a review in, and you can reapply with the same project as well. Now comes I have to see, yeah, because there was questions about budgets, I thought I put in a slide about budget. So I have unsuccessfully applied to the AHRC DFG UK Germany collaboration scheme whilst at the RCC. Because the Rachel Carson Centre gave me an extension to my initial 6-month fellowship to develop a grant application with a colleague in the UK. And as part of that application, I had my own kind of section for a temporary position as principal investigator for the period of 3 years. So you can apply for that on your own, or as part of a kind of larger grant application, or as part of a collaborative grant application. So there's lots of flexibility. And within that scheme, there is a whole range of modules that are kind of add-ons. So you can really create a project that suits your needs. So you can build in PhD students, you can build in postdocs, you can build in collaboration with artists, you can build in workshops or exhibitions. So it really gives you a lot of freedom. For that application, you have to, however, develop a budget. this is a screenshot from the budget that we have submitted to just give you an idea. So the headings you see there: project related publication expenses, module temporary position for the principal investigator, that would be my salary over the course of 3 years, and then workshop funding, public relations funding, and this is their kind of the DFG's template that you have to kind of operate within and see what kind of costs are they funding. And then in line with government policy for travel arrangements, etc., you establish your budget and you give a justification as to why this is necessary, and that needs to then match up with the activities and the work program of your application. So just to give you an idea of what that looks like. And for the collaborative project, I had to submit the German side of the funding to the German funding body, and my collaborator had to submit the AHRC part to the AHRC. Now, the good news, oh, no, not yet. So here's the page for the DFG that gives you an idea what it looks like, and you can kind of go exploring what the individual funding opportunities would be. The good news, I feel, is in this slide, you can see that funding success rate in the individual grants program by scientific discipline over the, 2017 to 2020, I couldn't find newer dates, but first of all, I find it very striking that there is a relative balance between the humanities and social sciences and STEM disciplines, and the success rate is quite high. So I have certainly in my lifetime applied for JFR fellowships at Oxford or Cambridge that had the line less than 1% success rate. So in comparison, this is a sure path to the lottery ticket. So it's a great possibility. And I think the numbers there speak for themselves. So I would definitely encourage people to consider this scheme. And to kind of reach out to possible mentors and to also perhaps see what's there. There is also obviously the flip side, just like the UK, precarity is a big issue in Germany too. And I would like to point out that Germany has a Wissenschaftszeitgesetz in operation, which means that there is a time limit on how long you can stay in the system without securing tenure. This is 6 years pre-doctorate and 6 years post-doctorate. So if 6 years after you gained your PhD and you're in the German system, you haven't been able to secure a tenured position, you essentially have to leave. Exceptions apply, which have to do with childcare or kind of other such exceptions. But this is something to kind of just point out if this is a route you consider, and whether you consider a long time career in Germany, or whether Germany allows you to add mobility and networking and funding support for your CV.
Thank you so much, Anna. That was great, really interesting, and very, very interesting to know that the German language requirement isn't always essential. So thank you for sharing all of that. We'll move straight on then to our next panelist in this session, who is Dr. Shona Hill. So Shona is a Mary Skłodowska Curie Fellow at Queen's University Belfast, undertaking a project on I can't get my mouth to work, my goodness, on generational feminisms in contemporary Northern Irish performance. Shona's first monograph, Women and Embodied Mythmaking in Irish Theatre, was published by Cambridge University Press in 2019 and provides an historical overview of women's contributions to and an alternative genealogy of modern Irish theatre. And today she'll be sharing with us about Marie Curie Fellowships. So thank you very much for that, Shona.
Thanks, Jordan. I always struggle with the title too.
Thank you, you're very kind.
So I'd actually like to start first of all by thanking Alison for inviting me to join the session today. I actually found out about the Marie Curie Awards when I heard Alison give a talk back when we were both at the Humanities Institute in UCD. I think it just really highlights how important days or events like today are. Also how important Alison is, the support she's provided to the ECR community. So it's really a pleasure to be able to contribute to the event. So I joined Queen's as a Marie Curie Fellow in 2020, and I'll finish my fellowship in autumn of this year. My research lies at the intersection of theatre performance and Irish studies, and my project is titled, I'll try not to stumble because it is a mouthful, Jordan, Generational Feminisms in Contemporary Northern Irish Performance. And if you want to read any more details about the specifics of the project, you have the address of my the blog post or the blog page for my project. So before I launch into the details of the Marie Curie scheme, I wanted to first give you an outline of my journey to this point. It's been a long one. I was back in 2010, and my career certainly hasn't been one of consecutive progress. I found that the combination of having kids soon after completing my PhD, while undertaking hourly paid teaching work, essentially backed me into a corner that it was a real struggle to get out of. So when I applied for the Marie Curie Award, by that point, it was the only scheme I could find that I was actually eligible for. Prior to the Marie Curie Award, I had a one-year Irish Research Council postdoc in UCD from 2016 to 2017 when I met Alison. And this was essentially the rather delayed point at which I was able to embark on building my PhD work. I applied twice to the IRC. I was successful the second time. And it was really important in that award was really important in that it enabled me to turn my PhD into a monograph, which was published in 2019. And this was undoubtedly of huge importance to creating a strong CV in order to apply for the Marie Curie scheme. While I was at UCD, I had started looking at different postdocs I could apply for. I was becoming extremely disheartened as I was finding I wasn't eligible for any of them. Most of them stipulated that you apply in a very short time after your PhD. However, the Marie Curie Award had an 8-year rule, and it also allowed extensions for maternity leave. So it meant that it was the one award that I was able to apply for. So I'd absolutely felt like the last shot I had at staying in academia at that point. The director of the Humanities Institute had advised me at the event that Alison spoke at that a very sound strategy for applying to Marie Curie was to apply once. If you scored fairly well, you would get feedback on your application. So if you scored well, you'll be able to find that feedback and hopefully have a good chance of getting it the second time around. And actually, that's exactly what I did. I scored well the first time. I was about 8%, I think, off the awarding mark. But from the feedback, it was very clear to me how I could fix the application. Fairly confident applying the second time around. However, there's one other key factor that changed between my first effort and the second time around, and that was when you apply, you can only include work that has been published, and my monograph was only under contract the first time I applied, whereas it had actually been published the second time that I applied. And I think that was hugely important in terms of my application. So I'm going to share what I learned through the process of applying for the Marie Curie scheme, including some of the mistakes I made. But before I go into that, I'll give a quick outline of the Marie Curie Awards and what's involved. So what's distinct about the Marie Curie Awards? So you have the description here with the link to the scheme website at the bottom there. And the postdoctoral fellowships, they target researchers who wish to carry out their research activities abroad, acquire new skills and develop their careers. And I think that's really the key part of the description, because the emphasis is on it's on mobility, which may or may not work for you. And it's also on acquiring new skills. And for me, I'll talk about this a bit more in a few minutes, but for me, that was what was really exciting and is really exciting about doing the Marie Curie. So in order to fulfill the mobility requirement, I was moving from the south of Ireland to the north, not very far really, but it qualified as mobility. And then the acquirement of new skills in my project was mostly around undertaking a practices research project. As I mentioned, I'm in drama, so undertaking a practices research project, so acquiring new experience in planning and executing a project as a practices research, but then also developing my practices research teaching experience. And then I made the case in my application that acquiring these new skills would position me competitively for jobs after the fellowship. So there's two types of postdoctoral fellowships. There's the European and the global. So the European fellowships are open to researchers moving within Europe or coming to Europe from another part of the world to pursue their research career. They take place in an EU member state or Horizon Europe associated country and can last between 1 and 2 years. Researchers of any nationality can apply. The global fellowships differ slightly. They fund the mobility of researchers outside Europe. The fellowships are slightly longer. They last between 2 to 3 years, of which the first 1 to 2 years will be spent in a non-associated third country, followed by a mandatory return phase of 1 year to an organisation in an EU member state or Horizon Europe associated country. And only nationals or long-term residents of the EU member states or Horizon Europe associated countries can apply. And in terms of eligibility for both awards, it's fairly similar for the European and global fellowships. In terms of your career stage, you need to have a PhD and also a maximum of 8 years full-time equivalent experience in research. And then the that you mustn't have resided or carried out your main activity or work in the country of the post that you want to go to for more than 12 months in the 36 months immediately before starting the fellowship. So that's the European awards. And then the global it's fairly similar. The requirement in terms of career stage and mobility, having your PhD, maximum of 8 years experience, and also the mobility requirement of not being in the you're moving to for more than 12 months in 36 months before the call deadline. So one thing to mention and to keep in mind is that when I applied, it was under the Horizon 2020 programme. We're now under the Horizon Europe 2021 to 2027 programme. There have been a few changes under the new Horizon Europe programme. When I applied to the Marie Curies, they were actually called individual fellowships. They've now been renamed as postdoctoral fellowships. There is now a limit on the maximum amount of full-time experience of 8 years, as I previously mentioned. Before there was no limit. The career restart panel has essentially been removed, and there's also a cap on resubmissions now. I think the cap is that I think it's 70%. If you the first time you apply, if you don't score more than 70%, you're not eligible to reapply, to resubmit. And then the other question, certainly if you are considering moving to, say, Queen's or another UK university, is Brexit, the impact of Brexit. And currently there is a UKRI guarantee of funding. So as things currently stand, any research fellow can come to Queen's or another institution in the UK at the same status as Horizon 2020. That hasn't been agreed for the next call because the Association of the UK hasn't been agreed yet. So that's something that you'll need to keep an eye on if you're thinking of applying to a UK institution. So what are the benefits of the scheme, or why should you do it? It has a much broader definition of an early career researcher. Certainly for me, that was something that was advantageous. It's European funding, so it is a prestigious scheme. I'm certainly aware of the opportunities that it's granted me, and also the doors that have been opened that perhaps people see me as having more value than they did before, now that I have a Marie Curie. For me, and this is probably something that will resonate with other people, getting an award is a real confidence boost after having years of precarious employment. What I've really enjoyed about the Marie Curie has been the opportunity to acquire new skills. The practices research elements of my particular project. I find it's been really exciting. It's really kind of reinvigorated my interest in the work, and I really emphasize how important or how exciting that benefit is. My project isn't a book project. As I mentioned, my IRC postdoc was. By the time I'd finished that, I was too tired to contemplate another book straight away. So I really had no interest in applying to do a book project at that stage. So the Marie Curie was also perfect in that respect. You can also build in opportunities for public engagement in the Marie Curie, which has been very exciting in my project. That partly folds into the practices research in that with a local need to develop workshops, and the workshops have been open to public participants in order to gather the data. So I've opportunities for public engagement, both in terms of kind of speaking opportunities, but also the actual doing of the research as well. Your mentor is very important, I think, to the success or the value of the time you'll spend undertaking the fellowship. My mentor, Aoife McGrath, is hugely supportive. It's given me a lot of invaluable guidance. So I would advise that you think very carefully about who you ask, pick wisely, think about their research profile, obviously, and how your work, what affinities your work may have with theirs, but also about working with them, how you work, how they like to work, your personalities, and whether you want to have that person as your mentor. And also, I just add on that point that it's also crucial in order to use that mentor, the support and guidance of the mentor, to build on the gains you make through having had a Marie Curie fellowship. And on that point, one thing that I'm very conscious of at the moment, as I'm looking to apply to different schemes with my fellowship finishing in the autumn, is how much easier it is to apply to schemes once you're in an institution, and the access you have to people and to resources, and to your mentor and various peers that can support you as well. In a practical financial sense, the Marie Curie scheme has a very generous salary. It includes a mobility allowance. There's also a family allowance as well, which is very unusual, I think, in most schemes. And there's also very generous research funds. So you can be ambitious in terms of what you want to do with the award. So what worked when I applied? As I mentioned, being strategic and applying twice, I scored highly the first time round. I was about 8% off the mark. So I felt pretty confident that I should be able to just about kind of squeak getting the mark the next time round by applying the feedback. But really crucial to doing that was the fact that I attended a session held by the Queen's Research Office. I wasn't able to do that the first time I applied, which I think was definitely to the detriment of my application. But I was able to go the second time that I applied, and I actually went to that session. I had my previous year's application in my hand. I took it to the session, and I actually walked out of that knowing exactly what it was that I had to do to improve the application. So that really worked for me. And I think it's a fairly common experience that people get funding the second time round for that reason. The ideas that I had planned, or the scope of my project, was ambitious. This was partly, well, for two reasons. It was partly almost a wish list. As I mentioned, it absolutely felt that this application was the last chance I had at staying in academia. So I approached it very much as, what is it that I really want to do, considering this is my last chance? Also, I had learned from my experience of applying to the Irish Research Council. I was far too timid in what I applied for in that application. I applied for a 1-year postdoc to turn my thesis into a book. It was far too much work. I absolutely should have applied for 2 years and built in all sorts of activities. But I didn't realize that at the time, because I was applying entirely on my own without any input or support from an institution. But we learn from our mistakes, and I absolutely learned from that, and was much more ambitious with the Marie Curie application. So the challenges to applying, I've mentioned this already, but whether you have institutional support, I don't think people realize how important this is, because so many people, once you're in an institution and you have access to a research office, to other people you can chat to, bounce ideas off, you take it for granted because it's just there. But when you are in precarious employment, you don't have an institutional home, it is a real challenge. So make sure, if you are thinking of applying, make sure you do contact your host, the research office. They will all differ slightly in terms of what kind of help they will offer. I know I contacted UCD, and they weren't able to support me in any way. It was very much Queen's that helped me out. But I know that at the sessions I went to, that Queen's also supported people who were applying to other institutions from Queen's. So they had a much more inclusive approach to who they would help. With the Marie Curie application, it's a 10-page, it's very stringent, it's a 10-page document, everything goes into this document. And that is definitely one of the biggest challenges. It's also what helps you write a really good application, but you can only see that with hindsight. Also, the portal that you have to work with is quite unwieldy. So I think the gist of a lot of that is that you need time. You do need time, and for a lot of people that also needs money in order to get that time. For me, that was related to childcare and precarious employment. But it's a big piece of work, and you need to treat it as much a piece of work as writing a new journal article and doing new research. So the big mistakes that I made, I didn't maximize the use of the research office at Queen's the first time round. As I mentioned, so do get in touch with the research office, see what way they can support you. There's a very rigid point scheme in place with the application, which I didn't realize the first time round. So respect the point scheme that's in place. One of my biggest mistakes was I was really tired and frustrated by the time I got close to finishing the first application. And there was a risk assessment section, which I decided wasn't really important, and I could use the space better doing other things. I ignored the section and therefore just simply lost the points allocated to it. So it really was a big mistake, but I was able to rectify that for the second year. And then the third, not so much a mistake, but it's something that I still find quite difficult, but it's a reluctance to kind of cold call people or ask them if you can see their application, if they're willing to share it. Everyone has different opinions on whether they're willing to do that or not. It's quite difficult to approach someone when you feel you don't really have anything to offer in return. So what I'd suggest is that what you could do is actually ask your mentor to do it. They have grant applications, all sorts of material that they may be able to offer to the other mentor in exchange for seeing the application. So that's something that I wish I thought of the first time round. So just to close up, I just want to emphasize the point I made earlier, which is that for me, the Marie Curie Award has been really exciting. It has been really invigorating. And I think a lot of that is to do with the fact that I went with a project that I feel very passionately about, really excites and inspires me. You're going to spend a lot of time working on it, but you also want to think about where it's taking you forward. And in terms of what I want to do next, I have clear ideas of how I want to develop the research. There are ideas that I'm really excited to continue working on. So despite the fact that we will have to be strategic and do the sensible strategic thing at times, I also think it also pays off to just really go with your heart in a sense and do what you really love and want to spend your time doing, because I think that is also conveyed in your application as well. So on that note, I'll just say good luck if you are going to apply, and look forward to hearing your questions later.
Great, thank you so much, Shona, for that. And I'm just going to jump straight on, if that's okay, to Shangli, who is our third and final panelist for this session and for the whole day. So I'll introduce him now. So Dr. Shangyi Li is a lecturer in comparative literatures and cultures at the University of Bristol. He's the author of Proust, China and Intertextual Engagement, Translation and Transcultural Cultural Dialogue 2017, published by the International which won, I should say, the International Comparative Literature Association Anna Balakian Prize in 2019. And more recently, Travel, Translation and Transmedia, Aesthetics, Franco-Chinese Literature and Visual Arts in a Global Age, published in 2021. So he's originally from China, and Zheng received his PhD at the University of Edinburgh and had studied at the Université Catholique de Louvain in Belgium and the École Normale Supérieure in Paris. He worked as a postdoctoral research fellow at Lund University in Sweden from 2017 to 2019, which was then extended by a 3-year research grant from the Swedish Research Council. And today he'll be sharing with that experience when he's speaking to us about Swedish Research Council programs. Thank you.
Jordan, thank you for the introduction. Now, so I'm going to talk about as the other speakers have done, start a little bit with the kind of personal trajectory. So I'm Chinese national, and the reason why I kind of mentioned that is because there is a visa issue, coming from outside Europe, and many of the schemes are not even open to non-EU citizens. I think it's getting better now. So I had a first degree in French and English literature, and master's in general and comparative literature. And then I fell in love with Proust. I went on to do a PhD in French at the University of Edinburgh. I finished my PhD in 2015, and this was followed by a 1-year teaching at Edinburgh. This also was the time when I was had the time to, not had the time, this was actually the time that I was supported by my, largely supported by my parents still, and what really had to start to work on to try to transform my PhD thesis into a book. And then also this is when I started really to draft quite seriously, draft the next project proposal for other funding bodies, and I was rejected by BA and Leverhulme, and I don't remember others. I mean, these are the two big ones, the big funding bodies for postdoctoral project programs in the UK anyway. So and then I was saved by Sweden, and that I came to that on the next slide. That was partly quite accidental. I certainly didn't have that kind of very systematic knowledge of funding bodies. I was extremely impressed by other speakers' presentation before me. So then, anyway, Jordan also introduced already that this was had a 2-year faculty postdoctoral position at the Center for Languages and Literature at Lund University between 2017 and 2019. Just to give you an idea what my academic CV looked like, especially in terms of publication. When I was applying for that faculty postdoctoral position, so I had one published journal article in comparative critical studies that was resulted from my PhD. And I had one journal article that was already accepted for publication in Forum for Modern Language Studies. And this was partly from my PhD, based on my PhD, and partly, and more importantly, I would say, based on my next project. I think that publication was probably more important, more important in the sense that I could already demonstrate to the funding body, my next employer, that I was already ready, moving to move on to my next project whilst preparing for my monograph. Then I had one journal article under review based on my PhD again, and then I had 4 published book reviews, which I think were slightly less important than journal articles. And then halfway through my this 2-year faculty postdoc position at Lund, I was informed about this possibility to apply for the so-called individual project grant from at the Swedish Research Council. And then that was largely based on my postdoc project. And then, so in a way that this project, my the eventual postdoctoral project was already funded first by this faculty grant. And then I went on, it was still recognized and accepted by the Swedish Research Council. And this particular individual project grant was actually open, was not called a postdoctoral project grant. This one is actually open to anyone that holds a PhD, but you need to be affiliated with a Swedish university. Now, I'll come to that, why that's still applicable to some of us who are not affiliated with the Swedish universities right now. Okay, so I think this is, I didn't actually use any specific database. This is just one of this mailing lists that came to my email box ever so often. I don't know how they found my email address, and so the job was actually listed on this one under the just. But so what really caught my eyes on that particular mailing list was the under the kind of a Sweden the category, I spotted a postdoc position in comparative literature. So at that time, I already had already tried BA and Leverhulme, so I had a proposal, a project in mind, even the drafts of that, versions of that. Then when I spotted this one, I really felt that that there is a much stronger institutional match with this particular position advertised. I just highlighted here, it says interest in theory development within comparative literature and world literature and an international outlook. So it's very different from that kind of sometimes a certain kind of national funding bodies where you have to somehow pay back, inverted comma, the taxpayer. You have to make this serve taxpayers' money of that country. Someone of my kind of projects, which on Proust and China in the UK, it's just not very persuasive, convincing in that respect. And then in terms of qualifications, it says that here international, not more than 3 years. And this was just purely decided by Lund. And then finally, a special qualification is a PhD degree in literature or or English, French, German, Spanish, it's Chinese, Yiddish. Now, when I saw this, I just immediately, I just told myself, well, actually, I could just take quite a few of them. So all of a sudden, my kind of, when I saw this kind of, this ad, this job description, I just felt that this, suddenly my kind of awkward expertise suddenly transformed almost into some kind of just the right expertise for this job. And so I suppose that there is a very strong element of luck here. And this actually goes for my current lectureship at Bristol, which was advertised as a position in comparative literature that has to, that needs to engage with French, of course, English, and with strong preference for Mandarin. So anyway, that's how, up until this point, I always felt that my expertise was feels very awkward in the British context. Now, so I'm going to go directly to the Swedish Research Council, so-called the individual project grant. So I listed the website, the address here. I don't know. I'm very happy to share the PowerPoint slides after, if you share the PowerPoint slides after this talk. So what I would like to do now is to just go through some rubrics and requirements with you together, and just to give you an idea what is expected and how do we go. Anyway, you'll see. So. First of all, it's 1 to 4 years, and for this year, as you can see, this already closed, so you would have to try next year if you're thinking about that. Now, if you don't know how much this is, I can, speaking from my own experience, I think this is a very generous scheme, and it's in fact my salary was higher than my current lectureship when I arrived. And then Bristol is actually more expensive than Lund and Malmö. So just give you an idea how, to see if you can't do the conversion, because a lot of that sum of money actually goes to the university, and your salary is just part of that. Okay, now I just highlighted a couple of things here. So you can't apply for this job. This call is open to anyone that holds a PhD. So you need a PhD at hand when you apply this scheme highlighted here. Now, I think what I would like to explain perhaps more is here. You do not have to be employed by the administrating organization at the time of applying, but you must be employed at the start of and throughout the grant period and any further additional availability period. The employment must equal at least 20% of a full-time equivalent. Now, what this means, I would imagine that most of us in the audience are not affiliated with a Swedish university, and this is when you need to make contact with a host institution in Sweden. Now, in Sweden, it's a very small country compared to Germany and the UK. The sad reality is that there's only those couple of few universities that always receive those grants, just because they have better support, institutional support for both outsiders and internal members of staff. That would be Uppsala and Stockholm in the north. It's not in the north of Sweden, but for most people, that's already northern enough. Uppsala and Stockholm University and Gothenburg University on the western coast, and Lund University in the south. And then perhaps you have Linnaeus University, which has been apparently quite successful securing these grants. So you need to make contact with them. I'll show you later in the subsequent slides how we can approach that, why you should do this kind of a code call, whatever you call that, for institutions. Okay, so this is something that I didn't see when I was applying. So when I was checking this last call, so apparently Swedish Research Council will normally fund a maximum of 80% of a full-time equivalent salary for applicants. And this means that if you secure these grants, your salary will be only 80% of the application. Now, how much is your salary? That was quite significant. That was actually determined by your host institution. So if you are at the postdoc level, they would try to provide you with the salary level of the postdoc at that institution, perhaps a bit more because this is externally funded. And then if this is only 80%, sometimes in my case, might be, because I try to lower down after that, the financial officer of the department actually tried to raise my salary just so that I can get a bit more than this stated 80%. Now, you might feel that the other categories like premises, running costs, overhead charges, those things may feel very daunting. But then if you approach any Swedish university, especially those big Swedish universities, particular department, particular school center, they will refer you to the department, the financial officer of the department, and they actually have template in place. So it's actually done. At the beginning, I thought it was totally impossible to manage all these numbers and statistics. But actually, in the end, it turned out to be just an exercise of 30 minutes, meeting of 30 minutes to figure out how the years and salary level and the calculations of the running cost is in the system of these departments. Okay, so the grant period between 1 year to 4 years. So English language is absolutely fine. I applied everything in English, although I have some reading knowledge of Swedish, but I don't even try at that level. So English is absolutely fine. In some sense, I will mention another different funding body. You actually need to do this in English because the number of reviewers, specialists available in that know Swedish language is just very limiting. So when you write this in English, it's actually going to be reviewed by all sorts of experts, not just in Sweden. And this is just a rubric of the application. So you on the website, they give you very detailed breakdown of what exactly are involved in each of these categories. What exactly is in a descriptive information, for example, research description. They give you very detailed description, what is expected. So it's a very transparent process in fact in this application. Budget, research resources, these are determined by the home host department. So they will have to submit that, or they will pass the approved budget form, Excel form signed, and then perhaps you need to scan that to the system. I don't know how exactly this is done now. Yeah, and then there's just normal things. What do I have? Now, perhaps a word about the evaluation criteria. Again, I really feel that this is very transparent in the Swedish system, although as usual, many of the terms are there's still huge degree of subjectivity when it comes to interpretation of these. With all marked essays, you know what that sounds like. And so the categories include scientific quality of proposed research, and novelty and originality, merits of the applicant, and feasibility. And they have a point system. So they will give you 7 rank between 1 to 7 in each category, except the feasibility, which it says on a 3-point grade, a 3-grade grade scale. So if there are 2 rounds, if you manage to get into the first round, you will be able to receive feedback. If you didn't receive the if you didn't manage to secure the grant in the end, you will be able to receive feedback. But if you didn't enter, if you didn't succeed in the first round of selection, then you will not receive feedback. The whole process takes about from March to November. So it's been like the German system here, at least give it at least 6, 7, 8 months for the evaluation. Again, just to say that, again, on the website, they give you very detailed instructions about what do they mean by, for example, novelty and originality. And they actually very helpfully provide you with a list of research kind of questions you need to ask yourself before even writing the proposed, answering, fill in different rubrics of the online application system. Okay. Just give you an example. So you need to get in touch with a potential host institution, departments, and their research services. It's just been like what Shauna just said about at Queen's. The major Swedish universities also provide such services, and they are not just serving internal staff, members of staff. My experience is that they are also very welcoming anyone who intend to apply for these grants and to make the Lund University, for example, as the host institution, because it potentially will bring a lot of money to the, the whole grant. The university basically takes 60% of that whole approved grant from. This is all open. There's no secret here. It's all very transparent how much university takes and how much you actually receive for your salary and travel costs and computer, etc., etc. So. John Phillips here, for example, is called a research funding advisor. I'm sure that if you approach any one of the people and then tell them which kind of fundings you are thinking of, and they would give you much thorough, helpful advice than I can ever give. So all major Swedish universities, those who did really well securing this kind of national grants like Swedish Research Council grants, they have very well established departments like that. When you approach, do speak to them, approach them. One thing I do have to emphasize, though, the thing I felt a bit lacking in the Swedish system is that we don't necessarily get a sense of mentorship. And I really had to work really hard through my own personal and professional network to understand how things work. I didn't receive much help from any senior colleagues, unfortunately. So maybe in the end, I just mentioned this another grant, which is called Riksbankens Jubileumsfond, just usually just called RJ in RJ Foundation, and Riksbanken is the Swedish central bank, and this is one of the foundations that that designed for humanities and social sciences. Now, the process is actually quite similar. Again, you need a host institution. And once you can secure that agreement with the host institution, and they agree to host you and provide you with the kind of a budget calculation, and you can apply for that's you need that to apply for this kind of fundings anyway. Difference here though, underneath the bottom right here, it says each researcher may only work in the project at most 75%. So Swedish Research Council is 80% now. In my time, I was lucky enough to receive 100%, and I actually had to lower that down later because of other things going on in my personal life. And so the RJ projects is the 75%. Now, what I understood. I went to one of these workshops. What I understood is that RJ was the major difference between RJ individual project grants and the Swedish Research Council individual project grants is that RJ is very much willing to invest in this kind of invest in the project itself. So they're much less interested in, I'm not sure interested in it, they care slightly less about the publication track record publication, and that's what they said. For them, what they are really interested in is the projects themselves, not the publication and how established the applicants are. Whereas Swedish Research Council, that one is different, and also they don't use a point system. They were very specific about this. They don't use the evaluation system is. I would imagine that it would be much more elastic than the Swedish Research Council ones. So they're willing to have a more high-stake kind of approach to projects than Swedish Research Council. But again, you definitely need a PhD. You can't apply for this if you don't have a PhD. So these are not technically labeled as named as postdoctoral funding. If you have a PhD, anyone with a PhD can apply for these fundings. Maybe just a few final words about work visa. If you have any of these opportunities, my experience is that the visa application process is very, very straightforward. Having lived in the UK, Belgium, France, and that visa application process in Sweden feels like a paradise as a Chinese citizen anyway. The other thing perhaps I'd like to highlight here is basically you'll be, as a postdoc, you're basically treated as a proper employer in Sweden. So the university actually looked after all the Lund anyway, looked after all the application, outsourced the whole have a whole budget. You just apply for the work permit for the members of staff, non-EU members of staff. So I really felt very well looked after there. Now, then I think specific policy, I don't know how interesting is how many of you will be interested in this. Just so you know that in Sweden, you'll be entitled to permanent residency after 4 years working in Swedish higher education, and not just Swedish higher education, just work in general, I think. But I'm no longer sure about the minimum percentage of employment that's required. It's probably going to be at least 50, 60. These positions are quite prestigious positions, generally quite well paid. Even if you are paid 70%, 80%, it definitely meets the threshold for the employing foreign workers in Sweden. Not until very recently, just a little anecdote, until very recently, they changed the immigration rules for PhD students. In Sweden, you can't self-fund your PhD, in fact. So these PhDs are treated as proper jobs. So used to be the case that you'll be having permanent resident permit. Yeah, okay. I'm just going to wrap up here. just to finally a word about kind of changing. For me, this experience in Sweden really is life changing. As a researcher, I had literally all sorts of freedom. I do really whatever I can, what I want. Once I've received this funding, the university has very little, kind of admin or teaching duties for me. So I actually dedicated my books came out earlier this year to I said to mitt oväntade kapitelsfärger, so to my unexpected chapter in Sweden. But there are other kind of more kind of life-wise, there's some other issues, but I'm happy to answer those questions in the Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Shangi. Another really interesting insight into a set of schemes that I personally would never have thought of. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to invite all of our speakers to turn their cameras back on again, please, and to join us for the Q&A. We have a few questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen already, but please do feel free to continue putting any further questions into the chat as we go, sorry, into the Q&A box, I should say, as we go along. So we'll start off. I know that I think Anna, you had answered a couple in text, so I'll just take the ones that haven't been answered at all as yet as a starting point. So Suzanne asks about wondering how we can balance or find extra funding for short-term scholarships for the costs of kinds of mobility, current housing issues, considering difficulties of finding affordable housing and so forth, and how to keep paying your rent at home while going on a short-term fellowship elsewhere. So I suppose cost of living is a big issue at the centre of that. I wonder, Anna, do you want to speak to that? See if I'm muted there. But
yeah, happy to. It is a problem, absolutely. I can speak from the personal experience I have as a single researcher with the strong mobility track record. I had no caring responsibilities. So I was only responsible for myself, and I was able to park boxes of books and sorts of belongings with my parents, and for long periods of time just lived out of a suitcase and lived in box rooms that didn't cost much. So that was the reality. So that's behind what then, it's another aspect of the CV, I suppose. That is not the possibility for everyone. For the 3 months fellowship I had in Edinburgh, they paid a £1,000 stipend. I could have stayed longer if I had, a post elsewhere that would allow me to have a salary, but I could only make that £1,000 stretch for so long, as well as getting support from my parents. So it depends what support network you have in place. And for those short-term things, I appreciate that, yeah, it's very, very difficult. And as Shona was pointing out, Marie Curie offers a lot of flexibility, and it's on the extreme other end. So currently I'm speaking to you from Galway, where I'm on secondment. My salary is paying my rent in Edinburgh, and Marie Curie is paying my rent here in Galway. So if that wasn't the case, that would be again a different issue.
thank you so much for that. I don't know, Shona, do you want to come in and add anything to that at all from your experience?
I can't really add anything from my experience because I've never applied for any short-term scholarships, fellowships, because I have young kids, and it's impossible.
Yeah, I could possibly, in terms of, I could add also, I had the Rachel Carson Fellowship in Germany again. Oftentimes stipends in Germany, you get a stipend in Germany, which means it's tax-free. But what that also means is that you're not paying any social security. So you're not paying into any pensions, you're not paying into health insurance. You need to kind of sign up for health insurance yourself. And kind of on a long-term basis, you're not building up any kind of pension credits, as it were. Whether there will be pensions by the time we're retiring, who knows? But it's that's another complication, I suppose, in terms of the problems of that. So there is the narrative one can spin that is one of great mobility, building skills, building the network, gaining the experiences, but it comes at a cost.
Yeah, very much so. Yes, Alison, please go ahead.
Hi, sorry, just jumping in there on that question. I do think that lots of people do house swaps with other academics. I know that people do house sitting for people who are away on research trips, and I think there's actually a website that you can use, which it all sounds a bit dodgy now that I'm saying this out loud, but I think that there is a website. It's not university rooms, that's for rooms in halls, but I think I had a colleague who was doing a Fulbright and they stayed in another academic's house while that academic was away. So I think that there is a way around it.
There is a web page called Sabbatical Homes, but the kind of homes that you find there are not necessarily affordable at certain stages of a career.
Okay.
As the word sabbatical might imply.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
No worries at all, but I had looked at that, yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm just checking to make sure I haven't missed any questions, or if any of you perhaps want to elaborate any further on any of the questions that you have answered in text, if you feel it would be helpful for anyone to hear you discussing a little bit further. I'm just trying to see if I missed anything. See, there you've given very detailed answers, actually, haven't you? Now that I see all the text-based answers that are there. The success rates are interesting too, showing you for the Swedish Research Council of 10%. No, I'm not seeing anything else coming through. I just don't want to miss anybody or miss anything further. I suppose maybe just as a final close for the day, because it's just gone past. I wonder if you would be willing, just to put you on the spot, but if you had kind of one piece of advice for us to sort of round things to a close on our first day of ECR Day, I wonder if you could give it in just a sentence, one piece of advice for whether someone finishing their PhD, thinking of beyond that, or even applying to postdocs, or a postdoc and thinking of beyond. You can choose as you wish, but one piece of advice that you think would be most useful perhaps going forwards. I know that is to put you on the spot, but sometimes it's nice to have a little soundbite just to round up the day.
I think maybe my piece of advice is something that I've never done really, because it's really hard to do, is to plan ahead. So if you're doing your PhD and you're planning to go on, you have to be thinking about that next step before the PhD ends. Actually, I'm kind of doing it now because Marie Curie comes to the end in the autumn, and I have this time started applying so that things, hopefully, the finger crossed, there'll be something lined up afterwards. But yeah, just try it. And it's impossible because who has the time to do that and do the research, PhD, whatever you're meant to be doing. But in an ideal world, that's what I wish I had done in the past.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Anna, please. Yeah.
Amidst the busyness that PhD and early career research life has and the pressure with which it comes, take the time to check in with yourself and ask yourself what your core values are and how happy you are. And the power is with you. No one forces you to stay in this line of career. If you find this is actually not for me, I'm not happy, or these are the criteria under which I'm willing to move to a place, and under those I won't. That's your call, no one else's.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
I totally echo Anna. I think sometimes unfortunately, you really have a better sense of your own happiness. If you're really unhappy, admit it, and then don't stick to, just don't stick to when you're clearly unhappy and you are unhappy, and do not try to fool yourself that you are somehow happy in this, and make decisions that really help you make decisions, whether in life and in career, in outside inside academia.
And it's not failure, like you're
absolutely, yeah. So
super, thank you. That's a very positive message to finish on. So thank you all so much for those I did put you on the spot, so apologise for that, but I appreciate you rising to the challenge of it. So I'd just like to thank you all again for sharing with us and for, again, really rich presentation, so much to think about, and a great way to close the day as we think about European schemes and beyond as well. So I'd just like to thank once more all those who have made the event possible today. So thanks in particular to Professor Ramona Ray, to the Curie Postdoctoral Development Centre and the Queen's University Belfast Research Culture Seed Fund for the support that made our event possible today, and then obviously carrying on tomorrow. So please do come back tomorrow and join us again. You'll find a second set of links, different links for each session, once again, on the Eventbrite page, and we look forward to having you join us again tomorrow. There'll be a different chair tomorrow. Susie will be sharing with you tomorrow, so you'll have a different face and a different voice, which I'm sure will be nice for all of you as well. So thank you so much, and maybe see you in person at some stage. Thank you.
And I also just want to thank Jordan for the excellent sharing that he has done so well all day. So thank you, Jordan. And thanks again to our three speakers. And we hope to see you tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Take care. Bye.